Today we have the most expensive GPS watch I'll review all year long, the Garmin MARQ Athlete 2nd Generation Edition. Now, of course, as the name implies, this is a 2nd Gen MARQ, but it's quite different than the past ones. In the past, it's based on the Fenix series, but this year they're switching over to basing it on the Epix series. The Epix, of course, being the AMOLED display variant of the Fenix. So it has all the same features of a Fenix watch, except an AMOLED display, which is a little bit brighter, it's prettier looking, and it gets less battery life, of course, as a result of that. But of course, the big question most of you are asking is, why would I pay twice as much for pretty much the exact same watch? And the answer is because it looks prettier, but it does actually have two new features, one new hardware feature and one new software feature. Now, before we get to all those things, no, there's actually 5 different versions of the MARQ series. So a little bit of a tweak this time around. First off, there's the MARQ Athlete here at $1,900. Then there's the MARQ Adventurer at $2,100. There's the Golf Edition at $2,300. The Captain, which is essentially the Marine or Boating Edition, at $2,200, and the top-end one at $2,400 for the Aviator Edition. There is not, at this point, a MARQ Driver Edition of the Gen 2. There was for the Generation 1. That doesn't seem to be here right now. About now, some of you are probably wondering if I normally do my reviews in jackets of sorts, and no, the answer to that is clearly not. But I have, in the past, done the Chronos, the predecessor to the MARQ series, in a tuxedo, and I think the original MARQ series as well in a suit. So I figured I had to go halfway. But as an ode to those of us that are not going to be spending $2,000 on this watch, you can instead spend considerably less on this DC Rainmaker merchandise trainer and chill t-shirt, linked down below at the bottom right there. Come on, that was like the most clever merchandise pitch working ever. Now note, this does come in this super fancy case right here. I've already taken it apart, so maybe I've got some pictures or video or something to show you. It's got a bunch of layers here. I'm not really sure what to do with this case afterwards, to be honest. That's all there is. I guess you can put jelly beans or gummy bears or something in it, but I think some people would also say it's kind of a waste, from an environmental standpoint, to have this giant case that no one's ever going to use again that's super heavy, but that is that. Now, all of these MARQ watches are essentially based on their Epix version equivalencies, but double the price with more premium materials. In the case of the MARQ 2nd Edition, it's got so-called grade 5 titanium, and if you look side by side, it's just simply got nicer materials. This is the titanium case Epix, or the higher-end Sapphire Edition one, and you can see the buttons are a little bit nicer on the MARQ. Overall, I'm not gonna lie, it's a very nice-looking watch. Personally, for me, yellow isn't my jam. I think some of the other watches and MARQ editions look beautiful. I'm not saying $2,000 beautiful for me, but obviously, fashion's in the eye of the beholder. But I will grant you, this is a very pretty looking watch. It is definitely a prettier looking watch than the base Epix, if you're willing to spend that kind of money. Now, being an Epix series watch, that means it sits in the middle from a size perspective, seeing Epix at that middle ground there at a 46mm case. From a battery life standpoint, if you don't use the always-on display, it'll get up to 16 days of smartwatch mode. If you use the always-on display, which is what I've been doing, it's 3 to 5 days in always-on mode. Note that you may see the display here on the table turn off because it's not on my wrist, and thus it's not in an always-on configuration. Normally, when it's on my wrist in always-on configuration, it'll dim the display instead. But of course, again, here it's trying to save battery, knowing that it's not on my wrist. All editions of the MARQ watches have multi-band or dual-frequency GPS. They've also got Garmin's new Sat IQ, which means it automatically selects between multi-band and dual-frequency GPS based on the conditions. I tested out that function this past summer in depth on a really long 8-day hike, and it did a tremendous job from an accuracy standpoint. That feature has become my go-to GPS mode, simply because I don't have to worry about it. If I'm out in farmlands with open skies, it pulls down the GPS power so it's not burning as much. But if I'm in the city or in the mountains, then it ramps it up accordingly. It works pretty well. This watch has all the new Garmin Enduro 2 features like Next Fork, which automatically predicts the upcoming fork and shows you the trail and when the next junction is without any routes loaded. And you will see this watch get all the new features that have been just dropped to the Fenix beta series, as well as the Epix beta series, which does include things like wrist-based running power. It won't be here at launch though, so do keep that in mind. But all those things should arrive in this watch here probably in the next few weeks. Now, like the Epix series, it has all the same physiological features, so things like training readiness, as well as training status, the whole revamped suite that Garmin released this past summer that makes it much easier to figure out whether you should train or recover. It's just a lot more clear than it has been in the past. So that's all here as well in the box today. And in the case of the HRV status, keep in mind that will take 19 days of wearing it, 19 nights in particular of wearing it, before that status populates. It's also got all the hardware you'd expect from contactless payments, the optical heart rate sensor on the back there, being Garmin's latest Generation 4 optical heart rate sensor you see right there. And you may also notice a different charging port, which we'll get to in just a second. First, though, let's talk about the singular new software feature, which is the jet lag advisor. The idea behind this is that it helps you predict what the jet lag impact is going to be. It gives you suggestions on things to do to mitigate that, and that helps you kind of show you where your recovery is based on how many time zones that you would have changed. So the way this works is kind of two parts. The first part is you open up the Garmin Connect app on your phone, and you enter the details of your trip. You basically enter in your takeoff point, your origin, and then your destination point. You can skip the connecting flights for the most part, and you put the times of your departure and your arrival in there, and you do that for each leg of your trip. So my trip starting tomorrow has 3 different cities in it over the course of roughly 2 weeks, and it has 12 different time zones and 2 oceans involved. And so it's got a lot of flying and a lot of different kind of places I'll be, and a lot of potential for jet lag. Once that's in there, you'll see a new jet lag widget on there. So you can see this right there, my trip tomorrow. I can tap that open, and you can see right now it's showing my current time here at 9:45 in Amsterdam, and then my destination time at 1:45 p.m. You can see it shows me an 8-hour time difference. If I go down, you'll see what's giving me basically different things I should be kind of considering right now. I can tap into these to see more details. So I can see learn more, for example. I can see light exposure, light avoidance, sleep, activity, naps, caffeine, melatonin, nutrition. And you can turn off each one of these things if you don't want to know more about it. For example, I have no interest in taking melatonin, but if you do want to know more about this, you can tap into this and you can see the details on when you should or shouldn't take that, as well as a whole bunch of other stuff about that. But again, most of it's more about kind of giving you advice. And that's the thing. If you look through all these settings here, I can go down to settings, for example. I can turn off each of the different components of this, as I mentioned just a second ago. And then during the trip, it'll show me this kind of what I should be doing in real time from the standpoint of each one of those components. Now, as someone that has flown literally millions of miles, I would say most of this is kind of like secondhand to me. But if you don't travel that much, I could see these things being sort of useful. Note that I did ask Garmin whether or not this stuff impacts any of the other recovery advisor bits or pulls in whether or not you're sleeping, all that kind of stuff. And today they are technically not taken account for. But Garmin says that's something they're definitely looking at, and the way they built it is to be able to take advantage of those things down the road. But for Gen 1, it's just basically focused on when you took off, when you landed, and kind of pulling together a picture of what you should be doing based on that. It's again not looking at what you're actually doing from a recovery standpoint, a workout standpoint, a sleep standpoint, etc. Now the good news is this will eventually come to other watches. Garmin says in particular it'll come to their Fenix, Epix, Venue, and Forerunner lineups, but I don't know which models within that. Obviously it's not coming to like the 10-year-old Forerunner 305. My guess that would be probably the Fenix 7, the Epix series, the Venue 2 Plus maybe or something like that, and probably the Forerunner 955 and maybe even the 945 LTE. But don't hold me to that. That's just my guess knowing what Garmin's been doing over the last little while. I also don't have a time frame for when that will occur either. Now, the next new thing is a new charging cable. Now, you'll notice 2 things about this. One, the charging side over here that you plug into the watch, it looks different. It basically snaps onto that like that. It's kind of barely magnetic. It's fine. I don't think it's like super great. I don't think it's super bad either. You can see, I'd say the other clicky one works in better. And then there's this side, which is USB-C. And this is the first time we've seen a USB-C on the side you plug into the wall from Garmin. We've seen a couple of USB-C devices that you plug the USB part into the Garmin device, like the Garmin InReach series and the new Edge series, but this is the first time we've seen the other end of it be USB-C, that I know of anyways from any Garmin fitness or outdoor device. Now, I asked Garmin whether or not this will become the standard Garmin charging cable kind of going forward, and I haven't received a response as of filming this, because I have to get in the plane I just showed you about a second ago, but I'll put the response down here at the bottom. There you go. That's the answer. I don't know it. You know it. I don't know it. Now, before we dive into the next thing, a quick note, if you're finding this video interesting or useful, just simply whack that like button at the bottom there. It really does help with this video and the channel quite a bit. Now, I've been using this watch for a while, and I've got a pretty good feel for it. And again, it's just like an Epix watch. There's really no difference whatsoever here. Still, I'll give you a quick tour. These are the widgets. So you can see like my calendar widget for my flight tomorrow morning. This being the recovery advisor, jet lag advisor, sorry. Weather, you can see my activity, my VO2 max, my training status. I can pop into this. I can see my VO2 max is steady. My HRV status. I don't have 19 nights on this watch. I've been switching watches a lot lately. So this one, you can see my cute load there, which is my training load overall. And then this is the very top end of that. So basically kind of holding in this green tunnel zone of goodness on where I should be. And I can go down, I can see my exercise load over the last 7 days, and then you can kind of trend that over longer periods of time. For example, my load focus here, I'm looking for the last 4 weeks of load, and I can see that. And if I tap into this, I see whether or not this is kind of where I should be overall from a kind of a distribution of load standpoint. Going down, these are more widgets here. Here's HRV status from last night. So my average of 58 milliseconds over the course of the night. Here's my 7-day average, for example. And this is where my colorful HRV status will be once I've got to that full 19 nights worth of data in there. And then finally, you can see my recovery hours. If I crack open the sport modes, I'll just go back right here. Sport modes up there. These are all my sport modes, the same as on a Fenix or Epix series watch. Scrolling on down here. Oh, the battery. I forgot to mention this. This new charging cable charges super fast. So last night, 2 or 3 nights ago, actually it was, I plugged it in for 29 minutes and it went from 9% to 60%. So basically it's on track to theoretically finish fully charging in under an hour, which is the fastest we've seen any of these watches go from Garmin in this Fenix kind of realm here. So that's nice. I would take the faster charging if it means this maybe not as awesome connector there. But anyways, the sport modes, you can crack into one here. So if I go up and run, for example, you can customize these just like before. You can go ahead and you can do navigation here. So I can crack up a navigation, load up a course. You can see these are some of the routes I've pushed into this from some of my recent rides and runs that I've gone ahead and navigated from the watch itself. Now again, it's really tough to show you like every single feature on a watch like this because there are so many. And I don't really want to just like repeat all of those things just for the sake of it. I think if you know about this watch, you probably know about the Fenix and Epix series. So instead, let's talk about the accuracy. For that, let's jump over the computer. So if we start off with this indoor cycling workout, it's got some high intensity intervals, but overall it's very, very solid. In fact, it's basically identical to the heart rate drop. Heading outside here, this is an outdoor cycling workout. From a GPS standpoint, at a high level, it looks good, but when we get closer, it looks even better. It's really, really spot on through some tunnels, as well as repetitions over and over again. And the heart rate for this also looks very, very solid, far better than the Fitbit Sense 2 on there. Another outdoor ride, again, very, very solid. If I look in the trees in some of this section, it is perfectly on the path, along with the other multi-band GPS units. From a heart rate standpoint, it's good, not great, but it also has some gravel on this ride, so a bit more variability. Then check out this city run I did right here. On this run, it started off with some relatively easy conditions, some tunnels and some trees and whatnot, but then I get into the depths of the 20 to 30 story buildings, and it struggled a little bit more than I've seen here from the Fenix 7 series, as well as even the Epix itself, as you see there. Still, it's not too bad. From an interval standpoint, the longer intervals were just fine, but the shorter intervals did struggle a little bit as well. You can see here, just really not tracking with the heart rate strap. Okay, so with the accuracy out of the way, the big question is, who is this watch for, and who's buying a $2,000 watch? And I would say the same people that are buying $2, $5, $10, $100,000 watches, just this one has all the GPS stuff. And that's the thing you've got to keep in mind about this stuff. And these watches like always get all sorts of comments about people get all irritated about it. But ultimately, there is a market for this. There are people, it's not me, for example, that will spend $2,000 on a watch and then spend it again in 3 years, right? Because ultimately this watch will stop receiving meaningful updates in probably about 2.5 years, give or take. I mean, history has shown us that with, for example, the Mark 1 series, it's no longer receiving the fancy updates of the Fenix 7 from this past summer. And it's, 2.5 or so years old, maybe 3 years, something like that. So at this point, that has kind of moved beyond the point where it's going to receive those new feature updates. It still works, of course. Eventually the battery will die and whatnot. But this is not the kind of watch you're going to give down from generation to generation. I know it's a comparison people want to make, but in the same way, like I'm into cameras, for example. There's cameras up here, cameras there, cameras everywhere. I'm going to spend my money on those cameras. I'm going to use that camera, but I'm certainly not going to pass it down to my daughters. Do you think my 3-year-old, 4-year-old, 5-year-old daughters are going to want that in 20 years? They'll be like, what's this? This thing looks like a potato, right? It's the same thing here, but just again with watches. And for better or worse, Garmin hasn't differentiated features. I mean, again, they've basically said, they have straight up said that the Epix will receive the jet lag advisor that the Mark has. So, in due time, anyone who buys a watch for half the price is going to get that. You are ultimately paying for materials. You're purely paying for materials and looks and the status symbol that is. And for some people, that's what they want. And that's cool. Good on you. For others, for me, I'd rather spend my money on camera or travel or something like that. Still, this is an excellent watch, just like the Fenix 7 and Epix before it that came out this past January. Those two watches, that watch lineup, if you will, has continued to receive pretty much quarterly or more frequently major feature releases. We just saw go into beta in the past week, another major quarterly feature release, and we're going to see more things get piled into that before that one gets pushed out to production. So if you're looking for a nicer version of the Epix, then here you go. If you're looking for anything else, consider subscribing on the bottom down there. It really does help with the video and the channel quite a bit. Have a good one.